Suction cups and tentacles versus the sea's largest mammals, the mighty titans of the sea in battle for their victory. Oh hi! That was my rendition of Squid vs. Whales. We're going to take a break now, but when we come right back, we're going to have the Group A wrap-up. Don't touch that browser. Yo, what up? How's it going? And welcome back to the show. We haven't done one of these in a little bit, in a hot minute, about a week. But we're going to be doing a wrap-up for Group A. And just, wow. I'm recording this about, an hour and a half after the Griffin versus G2 tiebreaker, which was awesome. And the main focus of this video is going to be talking about G2 and Griffin, and mainly just talking about those teams and how they matched up and what happened with that. That's going to be the main focus of the video, but the first part of the video, we are going to, talk about the other two teams in the group, talk about the losers. We're going to have, right now, we're going to have a moment for Cloud9 and HKA. Okay, moment's over. All right. No, serious. We're going to talk about those teams a little bit. So let's talk about Cloud9 and HKA. So just an overview for it. Cloud9, in my opinion, played much worse than what they actually are. But at the same time, they were never the favorites against G2 and Griffin in the first place. I thought maybe they'd get number 2, and that had to involve Griffin choking, which there is some credence to that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It had to require Griffin playing like the worst Griffin plays, which they can do sometimes, right? And it required Cloud9 to play their best the entire tournament, and we didn't see that happen, obviously. There were some okay moments. Licorice had a good game against the first game against G2. Blabber had some decent play, and obviously looking back, people are going to criticize Blabber even being subbed in the first place, but I don't think it really would have made a difference, honestly, in this group. Just C9 didn't play very well. They were already not the favorites, and then they underperformed a little bit, while Griffin and G2 performed about to expectations, actually. To realistic expectations, a lot of people thought maybe Griffin would choke. Myself included, I didn't think they would choke. I just knew the possibility was there that they would just go to Worlds and not be good, and all the drama around their team happening right now. But Griffin played what peak Griffin looks like, and G2 played pretty much to their level as well. Talking about HKA, HKA they were always the fourth team coming out of this group. They didn't win a single game, I believe. I believe they went 0-6. There were some questionable drafts in some of the games. There were some nice moments, like 3Z getting some kills on Gangplank and some of that cool stuff. But, just overall, C9 and HKA just were outmatched in this group. And it was a tough group. If C9 was in Group B, maybe stuff would be different. Maybe it wouldn't be. But C9 didn't play very well. HKA didn't play very well. And it was already one of the hardest groups, Group A, C, and D are already so tough, so... feels bad for NA fans, C9 fans, LMS fans, but, there it is. There it is. All right, now getting on to some of the real stuff. If you're wondering why I'm looking over here, I have my second monitor, I have my topics pulled up on my second monitor, so let's talk about the real stuff. We'll talk about G2 versus Griffin. Okay, most of this video is going to be focused on the matchups we had today, but we are going to quickly cast our minds back to the first times. Oh my gosh. So the first time these teams played. So pretty much day 2. It was day 2 of the group stages, right? So day 2 of the group stages, the first game of that was Griffin and G2. And G2 pretty much destroyed Griffin, but there needs to be context involved in this. When I watched that game, I was like, oh no, my exact fears were true. Griffin is choking. And so let's talk about that. So in that game, and you can even, if you actually watch that game live, you can hear the casters talking about it too, this is strange that they drafted this way, because they drafted the Talia and the Renekton, and they played fully around that and just weren't making the plays happen, which is exactly not how Griffin plays. Griffin typically play around, like, they don't even actually play around lanes, which is a weird thing to say, right? But if they do play around lanes, it's typically mid or bot. right? And what I mean by they don't really play around lanes is the whole idea of Griffin, they play a weird style. So the whole idea of Griffin is they push their advantages in the lanes they're supposed to get advantages in, right? So their players are individually good enough to where if they have the positive matchup, they're going to win it every time. And they're going to get incremental leads, and they're going to chip you down, and they're going to get advantages. And then when you get to that mid-game fight, you're just stronger, right? And what Tarzan does is he's the most integral piece to this team. I mean, you have to have the good laners, right? The most integral piece to this team is Tarzan. So what Tarzan typically does, and what he did today, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, is he controls the enemy jungler. He tracks them. He goes for invades when he's able to around the specific spots. He's always backing up his laners whenever they want to do something. So like if you have a lane matchup, like let's say you have like a Caitlyn Morgana bottom lane and you're going to push on this wave to get a plate, Tarzan will fucking be there every single time. Tarzan will be there every single time in the right spot at the right time. And that's why people praise Tarzan so much as one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world, or one of the best junglers in the world, if not the best jungler in the world. You know, a lot of people say a lot of big stuff about him. And you didn't see that in game number 1. They played around topside. They played a really telegraph style, which is not what Griffin does. Griffin typically do not do like, oh yes, we have good dive potential here. We are going to perma-dive this. No, they don't do like super telegraph plays. I mean, they do that, right? You have a Renekton Talia. They will eventually do that. But all the plays were like super telegraphed. And they were hard forcing around the lane that they don't normally force around. They normally have Sword just play weak side and just like, all right, bud, you do this. And then occasionally when he has, you know, Jace sometimes, they'll sometimes play around him. But most of the time it's just Sword playing weak side, Tarzan tracking the enemy jungler, doing invades when he can, and then backing up his laners whenever his laners will get those advantages. So you have a positive matchup somewhere. Whenever they want to go in for a good trade or get a good turret plating, that'll be communicated, and Tarzan will be right there to make sure that it can happen safely. And if the enemy jungler shows up, then they just win the 2v2 because they already have the positive matchup right there. That is how Griffin plays. That's how Griffin finds their leads, and that's not what they did in game number 1. That's not to say G2 didn't play well in that game, but mainly watching that game, it was Griffin playing bad. And Griffin can do that a lot, by the way. So it sounds like I'm not being critical of Griffin, but I am. The reason why people had kind of low expectations for Griffin is because they can do that. They do that. Like, sometimes they just fall flat completely fall flat. But sometimes they do what they did today. And Griffin can do that. And if Griffin looks like that, they look very scary. So let's talk about the games today, since I just talked about that a little bit. So G2 obviously won the first game, right? And they played again today. Before you get like talking crazy about draft and stuff like that, I will say this and I'll defend this. G2 had the better draft in the first game. They honestly had the better draft in the first game. They had more options with their composition. It doesn't mean when you have better draft, it doesn't mean you win, right? But when I think of a team having a better draft, I think about their win conditions being clear and them having multiple options for win conditions. They have like a team fight win condition and a side lane win condition. It's usually and they have a mix of damage, right? It's usually a good mixture for a good composition. And also another benefit is sometimes like a really solid composition. A team can do this composition can do okay, win behind, can also do great things, win ahead. Is a good markers of a good composition. And then when we look at the this is game 1, I'm gonna pull up. G2's composition hit all those marks. So before you're like, this was a draft issue, grabs, you know, the first game, it wasn't a draft issue. I actually favored G2's draft. Let's see, right here. Okay. Okay, cool. So this shows a draft right here that we had the Perks, Gragas, Perks, Gragas, Yasuo, Gragas bottom lane, right? So powerful lane that spikes in the mid game, right? You can get some really powerful mid game fights. You were against Kai'Sa and Shin, so as far as that matchup goes, it's not that bad as you would think for Shin, because since there's 2 melee laners, you can actually get close to them without having to burn your flash anytime you want to engage, right? You can actually fish for some things a little bit easier and feel a little bit safer about it, and don't get punished as much. So I don't think that's as bad as people think it is, the Kai'Sa and Shin, but the Kai'Sa and Shin is mainly for the team fights, so you can dive bomb the enemy team, do some cool stuff, right? But that's a really powerful duo. Spikes really hard in the mid game. You have ultra scaling with the Kayle in the top lane. A lot of people are criticizing the Kayle pick It's a good pick. I don't know if it's in this situation it was okay actually, but it's kind of I don't know. Kayla's a pick that needs to be figured out a little bit more, I think. You need to be able to get your Kale to where it needs to be, and then Kale's actually insane. But Kale did fine in lane. Went even, was actually ahead in gold in lane. The only bad thing about drafting Kale is she's not able to do anything for your jungler in the early game, so that's really where it hinders. Kale has a lot of matchups she can just survive and then outscale pretty quickly in the game, right? I mean, Kale will outscale Jace in the side lane pretty early in the game, actually. But the big issue with Kale is not being able to help your jungler ever. So anytime you try to make a play on the top side of the map, it's going to be bad. I think Kale is better as a bot laner, but can only be picked in very, very, very niche situations. So as a top laner, it's a hindrance to your team, but also a benefit. So I think teams need to get better at playing around it a little bit better. So, but anyways, I think the Kale pick is fine. You have the Ryze mid. So Ryze has a decent matchup into Akali. It's not that bad. I mean, you are close range, but can get punished. But you eventually outscale. So Kale outscales, Ryze outscales, and then Yasuo does fine as well, right? And then you have Yankos on Lee Sin, who can combo with any of these lanes except for the top laner. But see, the whole idea with this composition is you have this really explosive mid-game fight, and then you have double scaling options where you can actually realistically run a 1-3-1. Gragas is the best disengaged champion, probably one of the best disengaged champions in the game. Maybe Janna or something is better, but one of the best disengaged champions in the game. You can actually run a 1-3-1 composition with this. You can run a team fight composition. If this comp's ahead, you can do some crazy stuff with some mid-game team fights, just punish, full finish out the game. Also, another reason why the Kale is picked here is because you have a melee ADC, and then Wonder can eventually be kind of like the AD carry, Anyways, this composition checks all the marks. They have some early game options. They have a strong side of the map. They have multiple win conditions. They have a team fight win condition. This comp can do okay from behind, not from super behind, but can do okay from behind. Has a bunch of disengage options with the Gragas and Lee Sin if they want to run 1-3-1. Ryze is insane in the late game, all the utility he provides. So this team comp is not bad at all. A lot of people will blame the draft, but I prefer this draft in game number 1. Okay, all right, also in game number 1, we have Shin and Kai'Sa bottom lane. I already kind of talked about that matchup. We have Tarzan in the jungle. So this matchup, like Qiyana versus Lee Sin, I mostly favor Qiyana if she has some winning lane matchups. So what I mean by that is if you have winning lanes and you're able to kind of get control of the river and have Lee Sin checking blind into the river, it can be very devastating. If you already have priority and you're able to get to the river first, so having river control, and then you can almost one-shot Lee Sin out of fog, pretty much the whole game, right? Once you're level 6, you can one-shot him out of fog. With that being said, if the Lee Sin team is ahead, you can get control of river, stop that from happening, and if you catch Qiyana in a bad spot, the difficult thing about it is if you catch Qiyana in a bad spot, she can just stun you, then grass away. So it's very difficult for the Lee Sin, I think, to catch the Qiyana and kill her, even if you have control of river. I think it's very difficult to kill her. So in the terms of the pure 1v1, I prefer Qiyana most of the time. Even though it seems kind of weird because Lee Sin's like a real jungler and Qiyana is like kind of like half of a jungler, But that matchup does get kind of weird in the 1v1. You have a lot of outplay potential on both sides, but I'd prefer the Qiyana, honestly. Cool. But you have the Qiyana. Her queer isn't nearly as fast as Lee Sin. So Lee Sin can get control of the map a little bit faster, but has to have the lanes to be able to do it. Cool. You have the Akali, which has a decent matchup into Ryze, but eventually will get outscaled in the side lane. So that's always fun. And cool. So let's look at Griffin's win conditions. So their win conditions aren't super clear. So they have if they can get ahead. So what I mean by not super clear, it's not like straightforward. But if this team comp gets ahead and they get control over river, they can have so much neutral objective control, and I can have some really creative team fights around objectives, right? So you get your Akali behind them, you ult your Shen in, the Kiana hits them in the river against the wall. So you could do some really creative stuff. Viper can dive bomb after they do it. So this is pretty much a full dive comp. And then Sword on Jace is added here. One, because he's good on the champion. And two, it helps a lot with your siege because the siege with this team comp isn't very good without having Jace on there for the siege. So look, you have a winning matchup topside in the early game. The bottom lane matchup, I would prefer the Yasuo Gragas. They actually have kill threat. But with gank assist, Viper and Lehens can do pretty decent in that lane. You have a priority matchup mid and top. And so Kiana will be able to get river control. So there's a lot of reasons why if Griffin plays this right, they can actually snowball really hard because they can get control over the map. And the way Tarzan plays is he plays to control the enemy jungler. He plays to track them. And if you have control over the lanes in the early game and they do 2 out of 3, then you can do some really cool stuff. And then you have gank assist with the bottom lane, with the top lane, and then post 6, you have really good gank assist with Akali. So there's a lot of options in the early game for Griffin, but the win conditions are kind of like you need to get ahead, and then this team comp functions really well. But from behind, this team has to find like really creative fights in order to get back into the game. So if Griffin gets ahead, they can snowball, but they have to play their fights really well. G2, if they're ahead or behind, they actually have a lot of things they can work with. So that's why I prefer G2's composition. In the early game, definitely favors Griffin, but they can play really heavily around this Gragas Yasuo lane, kind of suffer on the top side, maybe look for a split map. They do have options in the early game for sure, and outscale pretty much heavily. Cool. So that was game number 1. Griffin just got ahead. Tarzan was smurfing in this series. He controlled the enemy jungler. They got ahead in the lanes they were supposed to get ahead, and they just snowballed out of control. All right, let's talk about game number 2. So game number 2 right here. This was also a very snowball game. For whatever reason, it doesn't show Wonder on Jace, but Wonder played Jace in this game. So let's talk about these team compositions and what actually happened in this game. All right, so we had Jace versus Ornn. So Jace versus Ornn, that's a matchup that Ornn does fine in. So you'd think that, Ornn's just going to get slammed. I mean, he gets behind in CS, but he's never going to die. You can just buy Doran's shield, and then you can build sustain items, and you do fine. You just farm up, and then your team fight bot. And look, I'm Ornn, and I'm level 14. Here's some items, boy. So Ornn is fine in the Jace. I was expecting Ornn to come out eventually as well. Again, cool. So that matchup is actually fine. I mean, you don't have control of the lane, and Jace would just be pushing him, but not really much to do. By the way, before I get too far in this draft, I heavily favor Griffin's draft in this game, by the way. But anyways, okay, cool. We have the Zyricon bottom lane, so that's going to be a priority. Bottom lane, you have so much kill threat onto the Zoe and Shen. So Zoe and Shen, you have so much kill threat on with jungle assistance, especially Zoe in the early game is pretty XD, you know what I'm saying? Especially in the duo lane. And then we have Tarzan on Louis Sin. And then, so it's a flipped matchup, right? And I already talked about how that matchup kind of works. And then we have Chovy on Galio versus Cassiopeia. So Cassiopeia does great in that lane, but and it's hard for Galio to ever really get onto the Cassiopeia because you can just put the miasma on him and it stops him from going in, right? This matchup is very beneficial for the Cassiopeia, but it's very difficult to ever kill Galio unless they make a mistake in the first place. So just looking at like lane matchups, you have a priority bottom lane for Griffin. They can basically control the wave and have kill threat. So you have priority bottom lane, so you can have bot river control. Is a priority mid for G2 in contrast, right? And then the top side, it's priority for top side. So in this game, Tarzan should not be able to make a whole lot of plays around the top river. It should be able to, if he wants to, split map bottom side or just farm top side and look for plays bottom side, which is exactly what they did. They worked for a lot of plays bottom side. You want to play towards the Shin, and they did a lot of dive plays. You have your Galio, you have so many dive tools. So that's what they did. They played around bottom side. Tarzan was tracking and was in the correct spot every single time. That's what Tarzan does, man. That's why he's so good. Is every time Viper and Lens wanted to look for a good reset. He was sitting behind them in the lane, right? He was sitting in the river in a pink that he's already cleared, or he's already cleared the brush, and he's sitting there waiting. And then every time he would time a gank perfectly with his mid laner. It was fantastic to see, honestly. And the issue with G2's composition right here is if it's not ahead, it doesn't do anything. So you have you have Zoe and you have Jace, which from ahead is some insane siege, and then you have Cassiopeia as like a consistent damage source, right? So this comp makes sense if you're ahead, but only if you're ahead. So if your Zoe gets super far ahead, you can't just slam people in the side lane like Jace used to be able to do. He doesn't really do that anymore, especially with how teams are playing now. But if you get this Zoe ahead and you get the Jace ahead, your siege is insane and your objective control is insane. So when a Zoe is powerful, you have when a Zoe is powerful, you get control over the mid lane, right? And then you clear the vision for the enemy on the openings to the jungle or the openings to the river on their side, and then they have to face check a Zoe, right? Zoe just sits there fishing for sleeps, and if she hits one, you Jace empowered shock blast, and then you Q them at the same time to instantly die, and it just gets so insane. And then Cassiopeia is on your team to kill the Baron, right? So you have really good Baron clear with the Cassiopeia. You have this crazy siege, this crazy zone of control, and then Kiana combos with that as well as she controls areas of control super well. So that's the idea with this comp. But if this comp doesn't get ahead, it does nothing. All right, look, and this Ornn is just a total brick wall pick. You're not going to slam the Ornn in top lane where you're just going to chain kill him as long as Sword doesn't int. And Sword's pretty good at just not inting. He plays weak side a lot. So he's not, as long as he doesn't int, he's just a brick wall. Chovy's not going to int on the galley. You just farm up and then you dive bottom, right? That's how you play that champion. And then Tarzan just splits the map and makes sure his bottom lane is secured. And then you just slam through the bottom lane. You take that lead around the map. And then now G2's comp isn't ahead, so G2's comp can't do anything, is essentially what's happened. So I definitely favored Griffin's draft in this. G2's draft was really risky. It has some tools to it that make sense, right? It makes sense. But it only has one tool. And the tool is, we got to get some leads. And then we can siege and control objectives. We take Baron. And we win the game. What is wrong with me? But anyways, man. That's what it looked like. And this is what Griffin is, boy. This is why everybody's been hyping them forever. This is what they do. This is what they do. Okay? This is what they do. Whew. But it's so fair to criticize them. I've been criticizing them. But this is what they do, man. All right, that's enough. That's enough. This video is getting too long. I don't want it to be crazy long. So we're about to end this video. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I worked real hard on this one. I didn't really, I put a lot of thought into it. There wasn't a whole lot of work. I just kind of did the little skit at the beginning and added some music and stuff. But anyways, all right, guys. Hey, thanks so much for watching. It really means a lot to me. I'm trying to do this whole content creator thing. I'm trying to make it work. It's my dream. I'm going to make it happen. Just want to be part of the League scene. You know what I'm saying? Been trying for like 3 years. We're going to make it happen, though, okay? I've done the time. I studied teams. I studied how shit works. I'm ready. Hey, see you on the next video. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.